Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for our webinar, Intro to Codefresh YAML. We're really excited that you could be here. Just a couple announcements before we kick things off. This webinar is being recorded, so everyone will receive a full recording of the webinar and a follow-up email over the next couple of days. We will have time at the end of the webinar for questions, so you can ask the questions in your chat box on the GoToWebinar control panel, and we will try to get to all of those at the end of this session. And finally, at the end of the webinar today, when you leave, you will be prompted to fill out a short 30-second survey. It really, really helps us to get your feedback on how we can make these webinars even better. So if you could take a moment to fill that out, we would truly appreciate it. Great. So today we have Noam Tenne, software engineer at Codefresh, who will be telling you all about Codefresh YAML files and how it works and how you can use it to simplify your complex workflows. So with that said, I will pass it over to Noam.
Hi everyone, this is Noam. Let's get started with the presentation. So let's take a quick look at what we're going to cover today. First, we're just going to make sure everyone's up to sync in terms of your usage with Codefresh, what you've already achieved with Codefresh, and just make sure we're all on the same line to get started with the introduction to the YAML file. Once we'll do that, then we'll cover some background about the YAML file.
Hey, Noam, I think you're not sharing your screen yet.
Sorry, yes.
It's okay.
Sorry. And then once we've covered some background about what prompted us at Codefresh to create a new YAML file and the build descriptor, we'll take a look at how the YAML file works, how it's structured, and then we'll do a short demo and show you how you can create your own YAML files to create both simple and complex build scenarios. So hopefully up by now, you've either had a small interaction with Codefresh, including perhaps you have like your own GitHub repo with a Docker file that can build an image out of the code in your repo. I hope you've already signed up to Codefresh and you've created your own account, and also added your repository as a Codefresh service and maybe tried out the build a couple of times. If you haven't, don't worry. We'll cover all of this in the beginning of the demo quickly, so you'll just get a quick understanding of how this is done. And we'll also make sure to post a link to another guide on how you can get started with Codefresh with these simple steps. So if we're all ready to roll, let's get started and dive into the Codefresh YAML. So why did we decide at Codefresh that we needed it? You might be familiar with YAML files from other competing services, and having the YAML file instead of just the UI has a few edges to it and a few benefits. And so some of them are I'll be showing in the next couple of slides. So if you're already logged into Codefresh, you might be familiar with this screen. This screen describes how your service is basically built without using a YAML file. This is just using the UI in Codefresh to configure the pipeline that builds your Docker images. So you can see on the top of the screen, it's just the general settings, the name of the service, what branches to build. And later on, as you go down in the screen, you can see that you can configure it to run different unit tests, integration tests. Both of them can be run with or without compositions. And then you can add a few scripts which select deployment to a container registry or maybe an elastic container service such as Amazon's or Google's. Now this is all very nice, but if you step out of the most basic use case of building images and deploying them, this can be a bit limiting. It's good for the small projects, but once you need something a bit more complex, this isn't so useful anymore. It's restricting. So if we need something more than this basic settings, what do we need? So first we have to have very easy extensibility. Extensibility in terms of if we want to add new features to it, because we want to quickly adapt to the new ecosystem, which we all know is changing very quickly. We want to be able to quickly adapt to these changes and give you, the user, new features, new types of configurations, support for all different types of tools as quickly as possible. So it has to be a format that is easily extensible. We want also you as the user to have maximum power, because we might all be using very similar systems or build tools or build servers, but the fact that I use NPM and maybe you, the user, use NPM, we do not all have the exact same use case. So there's not one tool that can really fit all. There's no one scenario, one configuration that will satisfy both you and me. So we have to have a certain sort of format which will give you this flexibility, which will give you maximum power, maximum configuration, maximum customization, both in terms of the individual step in the build and the combination of different builds and different steps. We would really like to have this configuration portable. So just configuring your service using the web UI is very nice. It's very easy. It might be pretty, but you can't really take it anywhere else other than the UI. Having a YAML file means that given a command line tool, you would be able to reuse this YAML file anywhere you build. So this means if you have a repository containing the Codefresh YAML file, no matter where the build engine runs, whether it's a command line, it's the web UI, it's maybe on premise, you'll be able to use the same format and the same tools. And last but not least is the accessibility. The YAML represents a sort of abstraction over very complex configurations, but we would like to make life as easy as possible to you, the user. We would like to have everything very easy to configure, very easy to run, and very easy to understand. So what would it look like using the Codefresh YAML? How is it built? Let's take a quick look at that. First, it's a DSL, a domain-specific language. As I mentioned a little earlier, the Codefresh YAML is actually an abstraction of the complex configurations that you might have. So because we call it the Codefresh YAML, you can guess it's based on the YAML format. Similar to other tools, all you have to do is place this file within your repository, and then Codefresh can pick up on it. And as a DSL, it also eases the journey for you, the user, to configure complex scenarios. So you don't have to get all nitty-gritty. You don't have to do all the bits and bytes of the configuration and running the different steps. You have to have easy steps to do the most common tasks, and perhaps easy steps to customize and do your own thing within these, in between these common tasks. The YAML is step-based, which means it is also procedural. So you specify your different steps you would like to run. They run one after the other. They also share the same context, which is very helpful. And we have a few different types to help you build your software or run your processes. So we have the git clone step, which, as the name suggests, it lets you clone your repositories anywhere you like and run whichever processes you like to run within them. This is supported by the same providers that Codefresh supports. So that is using GitHub, using Bitbucket, and Bitbucket Server. We have a Docker build step, which produces Docker images out of your code, a push step, which can push the Docker image into different sorts of registries. It can be the Docker Hub registry, it can be an Amazon registry, or your own custom registry. As long as it's accessible to the Codefresh infrastructure, you can push your images into there. You can run Docker Compose files as well. You can configure both in a file in the repository or using the Codefresh UI. You can configure Docker Compose configurations and run and execute different processes on the steps on a collection of different services and different containers. And not only can you run these containers, you can also launch them and have them live as processes which you can then check out. So if I have a web application, I can launch this web application together with a supporting database using composition, and then I can see what the application looks like live, deployed onto our own infrastructure. And last but not least is the freestyle step. The freestyle step basically comes to solve any of the problems which the former steps don't solve. The freestyle step is basically the way we let you, the user, run a set of commands on a certain container. We'll take a look shortly at how that looks like. And another important part of the step-based structure is what you do before and after each step. So you have events, you have different operations you can perform after a step completes successfully, or maybe after a step fails, or whether a step just simply finished. You can do different sorts of operations. And as you might know, Codefresh is a very microservice and container-centered system, so everything is containerized. So every step is executed with a container. It'll be a little more clearer once we see the demo, but basically you have to imagine when you configure a step, Codefresh fires up a container and runs the code you selected within that container and then disposes of it. This makes things super easy, super quick, and super portable because all you have to specify is an image and commands. You don't have to mess around with machines and configurations, or maybe start a machine with a different set of configurations and provision them. All you have to have is a Docker image that can support your operations. A step could be multiple containers. As I mentioned earlier, Codefresh can also run a composition. So it can be multiple containers, not only one. And also the execution is portable as well. So it won't be necessarily executed always on the same machine. It can run on a cloud. It can run on a pool of servers. It can run on servers which you host yourself and Codefresh connects to. There's full portability and all of that. So now that we understand a bit more about how the Codefresh YAML works and what drove us to create it, let's take a quick look at what the YAML file looks like. So we'll start off with the most basic YAML file, and we'll build on from there. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a simple repository which I've created. I've called it Django, based on the Python Django. This is a very simple vanilla web application. You can see I've created a Docker file here. This Docker file is already programmed to build an image out of this repository. And you can see I've got also the Codefresh YAML file already made here. Let's look at what it takes to build this repository. So first, you'll notice that every YAML file is versioned. At the moment, the YAML that Codefresh uses is versioned at 1.0. This will obviously progress as changes will be introduced to the format or to the syntax. And then we declare steps, and within steps, we'll declare every step that has to be executed. So if you're familiar with the YAML file and the format that YAML offers, you'll recognize this. If you're not so familiar with YAML, basically the step object is contained within the step attribute, and that is possible due to the white space that prefixes the object. So basically the steps in front of the test the project object means it's a child of steps. So every step you give has to be a child of steps. So for the first step, we're going to just run simple tests on our Django code. So I've named the object test the project. That's the unique ID of the step. The step has to have a unique ID. And then I specify an image in which I want to create a container from. So because this is a Python project and I want to run Python commands, I select to run the image, which is Python Slim, which gives me the Python runtime. And then I have the commands field, which lets me specify an array of strings. That array of strings is any command you want to execute. In our case, it's Python unit test on my module. And this is the most basic form of the freestyle step. As I said, specify an image. Codefresh will make sure to create a container of that image. It can be a public image, it can be a private image, it can be an image you've built just one step prior to this step, and then just specify the commands. And obviously, Codefresh will inject all the relevant context into that container. Now, you might ask yourself here, perhaps, where do I clone my code? I've talked about a git clone step. Why can't I see a git clone step happening first, even before I test the project? So just to save you some boilerplate code and to save you some time and configuration, Codefresh by default auto-creates a git clone step and injects it into your YAML file. So the first thing that will ever happen on every execution is your repository will be cloned, and all the rest of the test steps will be executed within that context if you choose. So once I've tested my code and I'm ready to build my image, I'll add the build step. So in the same format, I've added a new step called build the image. This time I've given it a type. This is not a freestyle step. This is a build type step. So I've declared the build type. And then I have to select what I want to call the image. I mean, every Docker format has, every Docker image has the format of repository / and the name of the image. So in my case, the image name that will be produced will be Noam Tenne /Django, very similar to the GitHub repository. And for the Docker image tag, I'll be using latest. Now, tag isn't mandatory. You don't have to specify it. By default, if you don't specify it, Codefresh will tag your image using the name of the branch that was built. So in our case, if I had to delete the tag attribute, my image would be named and tagged after the master branch. And now that the image is built, I would like to push it into the registry. So by default, all push operations are done into Docker Hub unless you specify otherwise in your configuration. So right now, I specify a push step called push the image. The candidate for pushing is the image I just previously built. So to reduce some hard coding of names and repetition of names, we've also given you the option of using variables within your Codefresh YAML. And you can use variables in your Codefresh YAML to reference different steps and different attributes of steps. In this case, when we want to choose a candidate, an image to push to the registry, I simply tell the Codefresh YAML, use the image that was built by this step, the step that I specified in these parentheses. So build the image references to the step prior, and that'll be the image that we push. Again, it can be an image that was built within the same Codefresh process. It can be an image that was built in a different process, but you could guess the name of it. And when we push, I will tag it again, latest. So I've got my YAML file ready. If we look at the repository, I've already created it. And we can see the 3 separate steps of building, pushing, and testing. Now let's see how we add that into Codefresh and how we execute it. So going to gcodefresh.io, I'm already signed up, but I can sign up with either GitHub or Bitbucket. I'll choose my GitHub account. And once I'm logged in, I'll create a new service. The service is named Django. I want to create the master branch. I don't have any other branch to create. And then I have a choice of 3 things. Either I can use a Codefresh YAML, which I've already have. I can use the Docker file, which I have, and probably most of you already do. Or I can use a template. A template means you don't even have to have a Docker file to use Codefresh. If you've got a setup we support, whether it's Python or Node or Ruby or Java, we have a certain set of templates you can use to build your repository in case you don't already have a Docker file. In this case, I'll select using my Codefresh YAML. The path to my Codefresh YAML is correct. It's in the root of the repository. It's codefresh.yaml. And here I can review the YAML just to make sure we've hit the correct one in case we have a couple we have to choose from. And I'll create a service and start building it. So you can see the first step is cloning the repository. As you recall, I said that Codefresh automatically clones the main repository you've selected. Second step is test the project. We can see that one test was executed successfully. You remember I've selected to run the Python Slim image, and you can see Codefresh pulled the image, pulled all the layers that it requires, started the container, and ran the tests, and that was successful. Now I build the image. The image will be pushed into the local cache of Codefresh, just so it can be reused across different pipelines and managed within the images view. And then the image is pushed into Docker Hub, so it's publicly accessible to anyone. So let's look at how we can make this scenario a little different using a few more complex features of these same steps. So I'll go to another file I've created called Codefresh Advanced, and you can see it's this exactly same YAML, only I've added a few more attributes here. Some things have changed. Let's see what's changed. So first is a very interesting flag, which is called fail fast. By default, if one step fails, and as you recall, I've stated that the execution is procedural, all the rest of the steps will not execute and the build will fail. But you can mark certain steps as non-mandatory, which means the step can fail, and if the step fails, you'll see an error, but the Codefresh process will continue executing. So in this case, I've modified my command in the test to fail. I've switched the test command with exit1, so the execution will fail, but I've also stated that it should fail fast. Another thing I've added to the test project is conditional execution. So because you might have different sorts of branches, but you want to reuse the same Codefresh YAML across them, you can select to optionally execute certain steps on all sorts of different attributes. It can be according to branch, or it can be according to properties or metadata or environment variables. In this case, I've selected to conditionally execute the test step, only when my branch is master. Then we can see I've added another attribute to the build the image step. This is a metadata annotation attribute, which means I'll build the image. If the image builds successfully, I can then annotate it within Codefresh with a certain set of key value string metadata attributes. This is very good when you want to mark different images. For example, if you build an image and want to make sure it's not deployed or not pushed before it's tested or before it was given the OK by someone, you can use these annotations as properties on the image to perform certain types of manipulations on it. So once the image is successfully built, I'll annotate it with the commit message that was used. And I'll add another annotation on the push step. So on the push step, I've used the post hook, which you recall I've talked about. The specific post hook is on success, which means that I'll re-annotate the image only if the push the image step succeeds. And in this case, I want to annotate the image that was produced by build the image. And once it's successfully pushed, I'll mark it with the annotation as is public equals true, because now the image is public, the image is live, and I want whoever handles this image to know it. So let's try to execute this and see what happens. I'll go back to my configuration, and I'll change the name of the YAML file to advanced, Codefresh Advanced YAML. I'll save it, and I'll execute the build once more. So the process initializes, the main repository is cloned. Now, if we take a quick step at the test step, we can see two interesting things. First is the conditional execution. Okay, it's completed successfully. That's very good. Great. So let's take a look at the test step. So the test step, as you recall, we've annotated it with a conditional execution. So it should run only when it's in the master branch. Now, the branch is indeed master, so you can see it matches the condition, and it continues the execution. Now, you also recall that I've changed the command of the step to exit one, to purposefully fail the step. So the step indeed failed, and you can see it also by the red X on top, but the build continued to execute. Now the image was built, and the image was also successfully pushed. You can also see that the post-success hook of the metadata annotation was completed successfully. And we can also see a proof of that if we browse in the images view. So if I quickly go to the images view, which shows you all the images that were built under your account, you can see I've got the annotations tab, and you can see the is public equals true annotation and the commit message annotation as well. So let's go back to our presentation. So hopefully you're excited about the YAML and the prospects of the YAML and the opportunities it can give you and present you and all the different advanced use cases it can handle. So I highly encourage you to visit these links on the screen for further reference. So first is our YAML documentation. We've worked really hard on working on having good working documentation for the YAML file and how you can use it. So this is a good reference to continue and discover all the different properties that every step holds and the different sort of steps. We've got an example repositories also. So one repository, the second bullet, is different types of YAML files, different examples of different scenarios that the YAML file can handle and how to handle it using the YAML file. And the second repository is complete code demos. That is, it's complete repositories which you can clone to your user on GitHub, then add it as a service to your own account in Codefresh and run it, and it'll run out of the box. And you can see a complete working example of a YAML file, a Docker file, and finally a running application. So if you've got any questions, now is a good time to ask them. We'll make sure to answer as many as possible.
Okay, so we do have one question so far. Where can we get a copy of the material being presented, specifically the links at the end? So I will be sending out a copy of the recording and the links as well, so I can send those to everyone after this webinar. You should receive an email from me over the next couple of days. Okay, I think I see one more. Do you see, let's see, we have from Douglas. You said the steps can be executed on different machines. Can you talk more about that? I'm not sure if I understand. I get the different Docker containers, but where are they actually running?
Yes, so okay. So thank you for that question. So normally any container that is executed as part of the Codefresh YAML process is executed on our own infrastructure. And that also depends on the sort of account you have. So if you sign up for the most basic account in Codefresh, we have shared infrastructure and shared Docker machines, and your processes will be executed over there. Now, if you sign up for a more advanced package and have your own dedicated machines, then you can also have a pool of machines. And once you have a pool of machines, you can specify either if you want a specific machine to be selected for a certain step, or provision a brand new machine on your cloud provider for that specific step. Otherwise, we automatically select the Docker machine to use, whether it's your own pool or whether it's our shared pool, just according to security, to location, and general load on every one of the Docker machines. I hope that answers the question.
Great. We have another question here. It said, how is it different from Dockerfile, Docker Compose, and Docker Swarm?
So it's a huge difference. It's completely different domains. The Dockerfile is a basic descriptor which specifies how the image should be built. That is, take the code, add some code, install this, install that. You create an image out of your repository. And this differs from the Codefresh YAML because Codefresh YAML works on a higher level of abstraction. So a Docker file which is used in the Docker build process is only a unit of work for the Codefresh YAML. But the Codefresh YAML runs multiple different processes. One of them can be an image build process. And the same goes for the Docker Compose. So Docker Compose is a way to execute and run one or more containers with a certain configuration. And that is also considered a unit of work. So Codefresh YAML doesn't replace the Docker file and the Docker Compose file, but it can use the Docker Compose file to run, stop, and execute different compositions, whether you need it as part of your build to inspect like a sort of a return value, or if you need to launch it. And Swarm is the same thing. It's just using Docker for orchestration. So Codefresh YAML basically describes what to build and how to build it, what to run, how to run it. Like I said, a higher level of abstraction from the other options.
Great. Let's see. Frank asked, can you install Codefresh in your own box, or is it a service that only runs on your servers?
So at the moment, it runs on our servers, but you can have Codefresh execute the actual build process and the launch processes on your own machines. So you will still use the UI in the cloud, you will still use the API in the cloud, but you can use your own builder and runner machines to execute all the actual Docker operations, which means your code actually never leaves your servers. Neither your code or your images.
Okay, let's see. Douglas asks, is there a global whitelist or blacklist for branches that get these pipelines executed? Are there other ways than the only branch match construct to specify pipelines for different branches?
Yeah, so you can use regular expressions on the pipeline configuration to select whether you want to run the process at all. And you can also select to activate or deactivate the webhook on separate repositories. And that's on the global level. That's on just whether to run the process on the branch or on the repository at all. If you have to go and kick it down one notch in terms of the levels and you want to handle only specific steps which should run or not run on branches, then you can use the attributes in the Codefresh YAML file and not the global configuration.
Great. Let's see. Does anyone else have any other questions? I think we got to most of them. I'll just give everyone a minute if there's any other questions. Okay. If not, like I said, I'm going to be sending out a recording of the webinar to everyone here today. So you'll get that over the next couple of days. And if you have any other questions that we didn't get to or that you think of, just feel free to reach out to me, and we'll definitely make sure to follow up with you directly and answer those. So thank you guys for coming. We hope this was helpful, and like I said, please take a second after the webinar to fill out our survey so we can get your feedback and make our next webinar even better. Thanks, Noam, and everyone have a great rest of the day.
Thanks, Brittany. Goodbye.